Hi, I'm Jonathan Wilson, and I am one of the co-founders of the FinCEN Report Company, and welcome to the FinCEN Report podcast. Today, we're going to be talking to Sarah Beth Felix. Sarah Beth is an AML compliance expert, the author of a number of papers on AML compliance, and an expert who is frequently consulted by banks and financial institutions on anti-money laundering compliance. We're going to talk about AML issues, the Corporate Transparency Act, and the new world that small businesses face as they try to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act and organize their confidential information. So, Sarah Beth, thank you so much for joining us today on the FinCEN Report podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this since it's late breaking news, breaking news.
Exactly. But before we dig in, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself? How did you get into AML compliance, and what is the focus of your practice today?
Yeah. So I've been in the anti-financial crime industry for going on 22 years now. I started out as a stock broker. I was Series 7, and then 9/11 happened, and that kind of changed some things, and got into the anti-fraud world, which led me into the anti-money laundering world, and I have never looked back. So, so I deal with a lot of financial institutions, both traditional ones, banks, credit unions, to global fintechs, crypto cannabis companies, you name it. I've got clients all over the world in all parts of the payment flow. So,
gotcha. And did you get specific training on the anti-money laundering compliance, or have, like a lot of us, we've kind of figured it out as we've gone along? But what's your background?
Yeah, there was no degree at the time. Now I know there's lots of different degrees you can get in economic crime and sanctions and different things like that. The closest thing I could get when I got my master's was, I don't know, well over a decade ago, and it was in forensic studies. But that was really the closest thing I could get without getting my JD. But no, the training is really just, kind of trying to dive in and figure out how can payment flows, payment companies be exploited by criminals, right? To me, I've always had the mind of a criminal. I just have very good ethics. so that keeps me on the straight and narrow. But I learned very early on in my career that I could predict what a lot of these criminals were going to do with how they were going to exploit different payment rails. And that's helped me in my career become really highly specialized in operationalizing money laundering and sanctions risks. So,
gotcha. So what would be the sort of, use case that would prompt a financial institution to hire you for what you do?
Well, I would say a lot of the times it's because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they thought they were doing what they were supposed to do in good faith. And then bank regulators come in and say, oh, well, you missed this. Why didn't you report the Jeff Epstein of your community?
Okay. So would it be fair to say that often your clients contact you after regulators tell them that they have a need to be addressed?
Yes. Yep. And that can either be a formal consent order, which is public information after a while, or it can just be regulatory criticism in a normal bank regulatory report. The other part that I do is for global payment companies and fintechs and cryptos, when they're trying to roll their payment product out to different parts of the world, trying to figure out how best in various countries where it's gray, it's not always clear, which the U.S. is also struggling with that. We don't have true black and white when it comes to some payment company nuances. So trying to help them figure out how do you balance a risk-based approach and also having a thriving business, right? Because you have to have both. You can't get rid of all risk because you would have no business. So how do you marry those two? So, yep.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah. And so how do you view the Corporate Transparency Act then, from the backdrop of someone who has been working with banks and financial institutions, and along comes this law that now imposes obligations on corporations and LLCs? Do you see that as something that will help banks in the long run?
Yes, I really do. And I've had a hand in the background, along with several other constituents in the industry, with trying to figure out how to how to collect this information in a way where it brings us up to speed with our peer countries, right? The UK, along with the Cayman Islands, I mean, you name it, a lot of our peer institutions, as well as smaller peer countries, as well as smaller countries, have been collecting beneficial ownership information for well over a decade. We didn't even require that on the bank side until May of 2018. We were in most instances, we were 5 to 8 years after most other countries were already requiring this beneficial ownership information to be collected at account opening for banks. So seeing how we were so late to the party on that, now we're even later to the bigger party of trying to identify the beneficial ownership from a federal level. Other countries, again, have this information public. If you want to look up who are the beneficial owners of a business in the UK, you can go to Her Majesty's website, and there's a link that takes you out to the registry.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have that. So we have a different government. I'm not an attorney, but, we have a different government here in the US. We have a lot of privacy laws. We have a lot of things in place. So I see the CTA as being an important element of really finding out who is behind a lot of these businesses that get incorporated in what I like to call onshore, offshore states. So in the U.S., and I've done a lot of work down in the Caribbean, and one of the frustrating things as a patriot is to be down in Antigua and Barbuda, and they are labeled as higher risk because they're an offshore country by U.S. banks. But they've been complying with beneficial ownership for years before the U.S. ever did. And on top of that, we have Delaware, Wyoming, Nevada. We've got offshore, onshore states. I read a statistic once that said in one building on one street in Delaware, there's more offshore companies created than the entire island of Bermuda.
Right. And by onshore, offshore, you mean it's here in the United States, but it is anonymous and effectively opaque, regulated.
Yes, and we have no clue who the beneficial owners are because of the laws of Delaware. So the CTA is really trying to take down that veil of anonymity. And as a former AML officer, and as someone who does do investigatory work for my clients, when I'm digging in and I'm trying to figure out, are these two businesses related? And I can't tell because when I go to the state site, I don't know who the owners are. Is it Jane Doe and Jane Doe, or are they not related at all? And this really helps from an investigatory standpoint for banks and credit unions, money service businesses, et cetera. Having access to this information about who really owns these businesses helps with finding out, are the money flows connected or not? So I think it's a great move. I know there's a lot of people that don't want the government knowing that, I know that there will be some pushback, but I think in the end, it really kind of moves our industry forward in a really big way. And I'm really thrilled to see it.
Yeah, sure. Now, at the same time, the sort of information that the CTA is asking beneficial owners to provide is the kind of information that, the media has been telling us for years, keep it private, guard against identity theft and so on. Don't give people your driver's license number. Don't tell them your date of birth online. How should we tell business people to think about this dichotomy that this is secret confidential information, don't share it, but do make sure it's included on your FinCEN report for your LLC when it gets filed? Yeah,
so that's an interesting point. Identity theft is part of is one of the suspected underlying activities for financial crime as a whole. So identity theft really is a consideration for this. And I think, as somebody who owns a couple businesses, when I think about going out to my other owners and asking them, hey, can you email me? Can you take a picture of your driver's license and then email it to me so that I can submit it all, right? I go, I don't want that information. And I don't want to know their weight and their street address and everything else that's on a driver's license, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of considerations, taking my AML hat off for a second, putting on my business owner hat. There's a lot of considerations that make me kind of squirmy a little bit. And that's where I thought your solution was very helpful for me as a business owner. It's something that the mechanics of it are something that we see in the banking world, right? Where somebody, or in the fundraising world, like Carta, we've talked about Carta before, where you can send an email out and somebody can provide information that way. And then that information is protected. And my other investors don't typically see all of my personal information. The same kind of thing in a different use case is here, right? I can use your software to send it to my other owners of one of my businesses to say, hey, here's a secure link. Do not email me your driver's license. Do not email me your date of birth. I don't want to know any of that information because I don't want to be held liable if somebody, gets that information and has an identity theft on one of my owner's side. So when I saw your solution, I thought this takes out the squirmy part for me of the business owner collecting everyone's personal information in order to submit it to a government agency. So,
sure. Well, that was the whole idea behind it. Where do you think business owners are going to put their trust? You're entering into a trusting relationship when you're an investor. You get pitched, here's a real estate deal. Oh yeah, I like this. I want to invest in it. Here, I'll sign your subscription agreement. Oh, now the real estate deal you just invested in needs to get your information. Would you be more trusting of the law firm, the accounting firm, the bank? Which intermediary do you think business people in general would find more trustworthy?
Well, I noticed that you didn't put the government as an option there. Just kidding. From my business owner hat, I would be more willing to provide that information to an attorney. Always an attorney. Probably second place would be my bank. I mean, and I think most people would say an accountant, but maybe because I haven't found a great accountant yet, I'm still little.
Well, but accountants are very careful. I deal with a lot of accountants, and one of my frustrations, and banks do this too, you get that email. And, we don't really send you an email with an attachment. Now I have to click in. I have to find some password in order to download the email that says, we got your document. We're going to get back to you. Oh, geez, thank you.
Yeah, right.
I appreciate the effort, but man,
right.
It doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think I think there's going to be some growing pains for a lot of businesses, especially because the exemptions in the CTA or in the beneficial ownership rule, basically, this is targeted for small businesses. I believe it's $5 million in revenue or greater than 200 employees?
It's actually 20 full-time employees, 5 million in revenue, and a permanent place of business. Yeah.
Yeah. And, so when you take that out, that's a lot of small businesses, a lot of mom and pop, a lot of, single member LLCs that are going to be, that are going to have to start complying with this, with this requirement. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of complaints, especially from the businesses that have gone to these onshore, offshore states that I call them, for the purposes of being anonymous.
Yes.
A few of the considerations that we talked about on a Reuters webinar I did in October of 21 was who's going to be the oversight body. That's what I have yet to see. Right? They say there's a penalty of non-compliance, right? There's 10, I think in the CTA language, it was like $10,000 per X amount of days that they're out of compliance. The businesses are out of compliance.
And it's come out now to be $500 per day up to a $10,000 maximum.
Okay.
On the civil money penalty. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know the original language got modified some. So, all right. Well, knowing that FinCEN is understaffed, I'm going to be curious to see what regulatory agency is put in charge with making sure that small businesses are in compliance. I mean, that is not an easy task, especially when you look at these onshore, offshore states where you don't even know who the beneficial owners are. How are you going to get in touch with that? I mean, I wonder is FinCEN FinCEN is part of Treasury. So are they just going to take all the EINs and look at all the 1120S type tax returns, then go look at their FinCEN database, see who hasn't filed, then send some kind of an investigatory demand to everyone who hasn't filed saying, prove that you're exempt? Yes. And that is exactly what I had said in that webinar. Will we see an IRS and Treasury, because they are literally right down the hall, like they should be talking to each other, which we did not see during PPP.
Nope.
No, SBA and IRS should have been talking. We could have saved ourselves tens of billions of dollars in PPP fraud, but we didn't see that. So now I don't have great confidence that we're going to see that on this side of using that data.
We don't know, but I mean, for those of us who are following the rulemakings under the CTA, everyone, of course, is aware that the access notice of proposed rulemaking was published. The comment period has closed. They've taken on a lot of fire, both from the senators who wrote their letter, as well as from the American Bankers Association. But inside that draft, at least, there were 5 different levels of information sharing. And basically the highest level of information sharing was inside Treasury. So in theory, it would be permitted under the rule for the IRS agents to walk down the hall to FinCEN, compare notes. They could do some kind of mass data comparison to see who has filed and who hasn't, and then go engage in some sort of investigation to see, are there misfilings there or not? Yeah. We just don't know if they're actually going to do it.
Right. Yeah. And see, it's interesting that that's your view of that, because when I read that from an IRS CI side, from the criminal investigative side of IRS, working with FinCEN to get beneficial ownership information, where you saw it from the IRS tax enforcement side, right, which are 2 different divisions of the IRS. So I had not thought about it from the tax enforcement side, not the criminal investigative arm of the IRS. That's where my mind went, was, oh man, these investigations are going to be great, right? This is going to help us bring down people, not just sanctions evasion issues, but also real money laundering, shell company issues that we have.
I guess it's either going to be great or it's going to be awful, depending on your point of view. Because we talked about, so there's the tax side of things, where you simply see who's filed taxes, who has not filed a beneficial ownership report, compare and contrast, go question everyone who hasn't filed. Yeah. Or from a sanctions point of view, I suppose, you could go to all the counties in Florida that have beachfront property, find all the LLCs that own the property, compare those LLCs against the FinCEN database, and then go question everyone who hasn't filed there, and see how many sanctions evaders crawl out from under. I feel like if we don't have a SWAT team that's specializing in what comes out of this beneficial ownership requirement, that we will still not be meeting what the FATF, which is our global supranational anti-money laundering sanctions body. The Financial Action Task Force is the name of it, the FATF. And I feel like if we don't have a specialized group of investigators to go after the good stuff that we will get in the beneficial ownership requirement,
that we still will be falling short of what the FATF has said that we needed to work on. We being the United States.
Yeah.
That,
I guess a specialized group of investigators is what you meant when you said SWAT team.
Yes. Yeah, not actual SWAT team. I am not stating
really clear
physical
about that.
SWAT team. No.
We don't need black helicopters or anything.
No. But we want, we don't, if a business in the US is doing what they're supposed to do, they are complying with the tax laws that are applicable to them. They are not, being used as a front for money launderers or fraud rings or anything like that, right? Human trafficking rings, drug trafficking rings. If they aren't involved in that, which is the majority of small businesses, right?
Sure.
They have nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about other than the fact that you have to disclose who your owners are to the government. The only time that you have to worry is if you have, a cousin that's running some money through your bank account and you're not quite sure where your cousin's getting that money from. That's the only time where you should go, maybe I should get my cousin off my bank account, because now, that's where I feel like a lot of businesses need to understand that this isn't from like an enforcement. We aren't, the IRS isn't going to be sicked upon all these small business owners. It's, it is for what me and my colleagues are going for, which is, trying to find the source of these crimes that plague communities. The only way you can do that is by following the money. The only way you can follow the money is if you know who's behind these businesses, really. Sure. So there really is good to come out of it.
Yeah, no, that would be good. That would be good. And I guess our message then for, the many small businesses that are out there is to get yourself in compliance, file early and file often, develop a system for your company to manage information flows, whatever your system will be, to make sure that you get your first ownership report in on time and you keep it amended and up to date, because that's going to, keep you out of the regulatory threshing that will take place at some point. Yes. When the regulators go try to find who is not filed on time. Yep.
Yeah. And all business owners have time frames. They all have to file unemployment reports with their state. They have to file business license renewal. They have to file taxes. There's all these filings. This is just one more thing that you have to comply with. It's actually going to take you a lot less time than any of those other things I just named.
Yep. It can. If you have your stuff
yes.
together, it can be simple. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sarah Beth Felix, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time talking. Any concluding thoughts?
No, I think just from a business owner perspective, taking off my anti-money laundering hat for a second, I feel like business owners around the U.S. are going to get a taste of why we do what we do. And the ones who want to be part of the fight and part of, the way that we can slowly try to make this world better, they will be like, hey, anything I can do to provide information to help, in this fight to root out these evils that happen in our world that are all fueled by money. So, I feel like if people saw it from that perspective, from my side, that they would probably not fear this requirement so much.
Gotcha. All will be well. Fill out the forms. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, Sarah Beth Felix, thanks again. We're going to include your contact information here at the end of the broadcast. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us, and keep watching here for more updates from the FinCEN Report podcast.